reasons why everyone in this room is successful. The first one is a term called practical execution. What that means is, in the real world, it's about letting your actions speak for you. It's about getting the job done. And most people go through life and they talk one hell of a game, don't they? They're going to achieve this goal, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. Most of them don't do it. And when I was a kid, my father always used to tell me, actions speak louder than words. And I'm so glad he ingrained that in me as a young man, because on The Apprentice, I kept my mouth shut, I put my head down, and I let my actions speak for me, week after week after week. So it's about practical execution. It's about agility. It's about having the ability to leave your comfort zone. It's about taking the blinders off and adjusting and adapting to what's happening around you. And on that final task on The Apprentice, I don't know if you guys remember this, but we had to hire back the people who were just fired, right? And I thought to myself, this is strange. These are not my typical employees. These people were just fired, and many times I had to, point out their weaknesses, to say it politely. And I can't treat them like a normal employee. I said, I've got to become a micromanager. I've got to double and triple check everything that they do. And I did. Now, my competitor, who had an incredible pedigree, went to Harvard Business School, he did things the way the Harvard textbook taught him, and he followed that textbook to the letter of the law. But the textbook forgot about one person. Does the name Omarosa ring a bell? The Canadian tried to steal my punchline. I beat you to it. Son of a gun. But they forgot about Omarosa, and Omarosa was not the best employee you could have, and she did everything she could to sabotage this guy. He didn't exercise agility. He didn't adapt. He didn't realize that the world had changed, that particular environment. Thank God I did that. So it's about practical execution, it's about agility, and lastly, it's about risk. It's about taking risk, but managing that risk, and many times you got to micromanage that risk, and you have to convert it into success. Now, success is a funny word, and I often wonder, why are some people successful in this world, and unfortunately, many not? And for me, it comes down to one word, and that word is fear. I don't know if you knew this, but when we're born into the world, we're only born with two natural fears, the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. And every other fear we have is learned. And so many people are afraid to fail, or they're afraid they're going to make a mistake, or they're afraid what their friends or colleagues are going to say, that they never even try. In my opinion, that's the biggest failure of them all. I think Emerson said it best when he said, always, always, always do what you're afraid to do, and success will follow. Now, I know all about fear. When I first got hired on by Trump, I had to go work on a high-rise in Chicago. And I was scared. I thought, I've got to spend the next 3 years building this building with Trump. I'm a dead man. And then he called me about 2 weeks after I won, and that was a little weird, the first time Trump calls you on your cell phone. But it's the call that I claim really set the tempo for our relationship. And he called me up. He said, Bill, Donald here. He said, I need you to do me a favor. I said, okay, Mr. Trump, whatever you need. He said, well, I'd like you to fly with me tomorrow down to Quito, Ecuador, because I want you to be a judge at my Miss Universe contest. I said, Donald, I'm a company man, brother. I will do whatever I need to do to help this company. So we get on his plane, we fly down to Quito, Ecuador, and it was a Wednesday, and Thursday was the competition. We're going to fly back on Friday. So Wednesday, we fly down. Thursday, we sit down, we have breakfast, and at breakfast, Trump, he says, Bill, change of plans. We're going to leave right after this competition. We'll fly through the night on my plane so we can get back to New York and get some work done on Friday. Well, this was not what I wanted to hear, because the entire flight down on that plane, a couple of the guys who were on there, they were casino owners, they were telling me about the most incredible party that happens right after this Miss Universe contest. And all the Miss Universe contestants come to this party, and it's like fun. So I wanted to go to this party, right? Who wouldn't? But how am I going to tell Trump, I'm 2 weeks on the job, that I want to go to some party because there's all these Miss Universe contestants? I mean, I must have a screw loose, right? And all day long, I'm oscillating back and forth. Do I stay? Do I go? What do I do here? And about 4:30 that afternoon, I finally work up enough courage, and I pull Donald Trump aside. I said, Mr. Trump, I think I'm going to fly home tomorrow morning on American Airlines, because I really want to go to this party with all the Miss Universe contestants. And he pauses, and he gets that look. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, here it goes. And I'm sweating at this point. I'm like, oh, I'm done. And he says, good choice, Bill. I would do the same thing if I were you. So I knew I was in good hands, but I have to be honest. When I first won this, I thought, I'm probably never going to see Trump again. I thought it was a TV show. This is, that wasn't the case. He held up his end of the bargain. He showed me what business is like at his level, and he opened up his world to me. And for me, it was amazing because I got to realize that business at his level isn't much different than business at our level. The numbers are a lot larger, but I learned that the fundamentals of business, they never change. And the successful ones are the ones who can understand and grasp and master those fundamentals of business and use those as their foundation. And if they have the fundamentals mastered, they can build upon that foundation anything they want. Now, before I went to go build this building in Chicago, I had to learn. I'd never built a high-rise before, obviously. So I got shipped off to a town called White Plains, New York. Anyone here familiar with White Plains, New York? Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I had to go learn how these buildings are built, and they were building a high-rise in downtown White Plains. And I learned a very important lesson about life from a guy. He was the chairman of a major construction company out there, and he was this big guy and he had this thick Brooklyn accent. And I was scared of him at first because, the Sopranos TV show was popular at that time, and construction business, my mind was pretty active. But it turned out he was a brilliant guy because a couple days on the job, I was in over my head. I was in a business that I had never really spent a great deal of time in, and he could see that. And as I was leaving the office one day, he turned to me and he said, hey, Bill, he said, be the conductor. And I looked at him and I said, okay, will do, Greg. And I had no idea what he was talking about. And I left work. I was, scared of the guy. And I got into the car and we're heading back into Manhattan. As I'm heading back into Manhattan, I'm thinking to myself, be the conductor. Was he referring to the conductor of a locomotive? What was this guy getting at? And then it hit me. He's referring to the conductor of an orchestra. You see, the conductor of an orchestra has all these expert musicians in his or her pit, and they play their instruments to absolute perfection. The conductor himself is not an expert at playing each and every one of those instruments, but he gets them all to play in harmony with one another. And the moral of the story is so many of us let our egos get in the way, and we stunt our growth. The conductor has no ego. He realizes that he's surrounding himself around people who are better at playing those instruments than he is. And in life, when we check our ego at the door, we're not afraid to leave that comfort zone. We're not afraid to take the blinders off. We're not afraid of change and adapting. The ones who say, I know everything there is to know about this business, don't tell me how to do this thing, son, those are the guys that end up here. The successful ones are the ones who say, let's look at everything. Let's look at a different way. Let's approach this differently. We talk about agility. Agility is something that should spill over into every aspect of your life because it opens up new ideas. When you drive to work, try taking a different route to work tomorrow. You'll be surprised what happens. My wife and I, we're big runners, and we always run north on the lakefront in Chicago. And we were in a rut, just like we get into at work, in sales, you get into a rut. And I said, let's head south. And we decided to head south, and wouldn't you know it, we found a restaurant that we'd never seen before. We saw things at the city that we'd never knew existed, and it changed up our perspective on things. But we got out of that rut. We were agile, and agility spills over into everything that you do. Now, one of the things I love to do is I love to people watch. Any people watchers here? Right? You can learn so much good and bad by watching people, I think. Oftentimes more bad than good. And I've been very lucky because I've been able to surround myself with some innovators. I spent a lot of time with Trump, and I spent time with Ted Turner and Mark Cuban, and I've watched these guys. And I noticed that although these guys have completely different personalities, they all have almost identical traits. And I think these are traits that we probably want to emulate. And I'm going to share them with you very quickly. First and foremost, they're all good decision makers. They see opportunities, they take advantage of the opportunities, and they're able to make decisions. And early on, Trump, he pulled me aside. He said, I'll support you right or wrong, whatever decision you make. But the day you don't make a decision is the day I'm going to fire you. And there's a lot of truth to that. Analysis paralysis. We have one foot on the pier and one foot on the boat, and we never get anywhere. The successful ones are the ones who educate themselves and see those opportunities, and they take advantage of it. Secondly, they're creative. They're creative marketing and sales professionals. They find ways to sell their products in a creative way. And had I not been creative with those Coke bottle glasses sending those packages out, who knows where cigars around the world would have wound up. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I had a problem, and my problem was I didn't have enough money to market it, but I found a solution. And thirdly, they never quit, and they never make excuses. As I mentioned earlier, so many people go through life pointing the finger all around them, blaming everyone else. The successful ones point the finger right at themselves. And Trump, in the 90s, the real estate market in Manhattan was done. He was billions of dollars in debt. No one would even return his call. He never gave up, and he found creative ways to come back and market himself and build his brand. He's never forgotten who those people are who didn't return his call, and today he's at the highest level he's ever been. So I've spent time with very innovative people, with people who know how to sell and market and understand business, and then I just finished working on a show for A&E called We Mean Business. And I get to go in and work with sales teams and marketing experts who aren't doing well. And I come in and I try to turn their businesses around. And I've studied these people as well. I mean, these are interesting case studies. But I've noticed that, again, these people have different personalities, but they all have almost identical traits, much different than the three I just mentioned. A couple that I think if we want to really take a look at ourselves. One, they're all reactive rather than proactive. You know people like this? They wait for the problem to arise, and then they put those fires out, and they like that drama in their lives. The successful ones are the ones who are anticipating the problems of their customers or in their life and coming up with solutions before the problem even develops. Those are the ones who are successful. So they're reactive rather than proactive. Secondly, they surround themselves with negative people. Interesting study I just read. It said the majority of the people we come into contact with on a daily basis are negative. It went on to say that you're never going to be able to eliminate those people from your lives, but if you're aware of who they are and what their intentions are, you negate their power. And when you're on a path to success, there's always going to be those people who feel the need to pull you down in order to build themselves up. There's always going to be those people who are jealous of your ambition, of your drive, of where you're heading in life. Be careful of those people. So they're reactive rather than proactive. They surround themselves with negative people. And lastly, it's about potential. Potential is probably the best God-given asset we have, yet it's the most underutilized. And I think when we're born into this world, we're born with a certain amount of currency in the form of potential. And it's up to us to make it grow. It's up to us to make it multiply. Yet so many of us don't do anything with it. And I want to end with this story I was reading the other day, because this fellow has a very interesting perspective on the power of potential. And I think it's fitting for this group. It's from an evangelist, interestingly enough. And he said, I heard somebody say the wealthiest place on earth is not Fort Knox or the oil fields in the Middle East, nor is it the gold and diamond mines in South Africa. Ironically, the wealthiest places on earth are the cemeteries, because lying in those graves are all kinds of dreams and desires that will never be fulfilled. Buried beneath the ground are books that will never be written, sales goals that will never be met, and relationships that will never be formed. Sadly, the incredible power of potential is lying in those graves. So it's up to us not to bury that potential. It's up to us to find creative ways to market ourselves and our products. We have to be agile, take the blinders off, and always remember this. This is what I love to end with. Tough times don't last, but tough people do. Thank you, folks, for having me here this morning. Thank you. Thank you. So, thank you. Especially to the Canadian contingency. We have some time for questions, so you can ask me anything you want. Glad we got the hair question out of the way. It's always a popular one. But we've got microphones there, and the right, the left, and in the center. Oh, yes, ma'am.
I imagine there were some people along the way who said, you can't do this, you can't do that. How did you overcome that? And clear you're successful, but what did you do to say, no, I got it?
Well, that's a great question, and it's happened in every aspect of my life. When I first went on, The Apprentice, I shouldn't have won. I didn't have a fancy education. I didn't come from a wealthy family. But I love when people tell me I can't do something. I use that as fuel and ammunition, and it motivates the heck